আমার নাম হচ্ছে এহসান চৌধুরী। আমার বয়স হচ্ছে 28। আমি এই দেশে আসছি গত বছরে 2022-এর সেপ্টেম্বরে আসছি আমি।
My name's Anthony. I'm a resident of Tarning West Estate. I've lived here for 11 years. I was born in the area.
I am literally across the road from Maddocks House where the fire started, and I've always lived in this area since I was a small child.
Shadwell, the ward is about 70% Bangladeshi. Many people, his parents came from Bangladesh in the 70s, 2 or 3 generations since. They've grown up in these blocks in this area.
এইখানে আসছি ইউনিভার্সিটি অফ হার্টফোর্ডশায়ারে ল এলএলবিতে পড়তেছি। আর আমি আসছি 5 থেকে 6 মাস হলো ইউকেতে। আইসা প্রথমে আমি এখন যে বাসায় ছিলাম মানে 18 ম্যাডক হাউস, এই বাসাতে আমি এসে উঠছি কজ অন্য কোনো বাসা আমি খুঁজে পাইনি।
ওই বাসার মালিকের নাম্বারটা দেয় আমার একটা ফ্রেন্ডের ফ্রেন্ড, মিউচুয়াল ফ্রেন্ড। তো আমি এরকম যোগাযোগ করার পর আমি মোটামুটি কনফার্ম হই, আমি আমার একটা সিট পাইছি, বুক হয়েছে। ওরা বলছে এরকম রেন্ট, চাইলে উঠতে পারবো, অ্যাডভান্স দিতে হবে 1 সপ্তাহের।
লন্ডনের একটা আলাদা একটা ছবি চোখে ভাসে, কিন্তু আসার পরে বাস্তবতা যেটা দেখছে ওটা তো পুরো আকাশ রাত দিন তফাৎ। তো আমার কাছে লন্ডনের বাসার এক্সপিরিয়েন্স বলতে 18 ম্যাডক হাউস। আমি জানি না যে এর চেয়ে বেটার অ্যাকোমোডেশন কোনটা বা কোনো কিছু আছে কিনা।
স্বপ্নের দেশ, সবার ইচ্ছা। তো আসার পর আসলে ওইভাবে আমি পাই না। এই ব্যাপারটা হচ্ছে যে আমাদের দেশের কিছু স্লাম এরিয়া আছে যেটা বস্তি টাইপ, যে বস্তি টাইপের চেয়েও এই জায়গাটা অনেক খারাপ ছিল, নোংরা। মাত্র 2 বেডরুমের বাসা, কিন্তু অনেকগুলা মানুষ থাকে।
When we moved in, about the flat sort of down the corridor from us, we were on the same floor as the flat where the fire happened, and it was kind of curious when we moved in because we didn't really know what to expect. So there were lots of things that later came out to be consistent with a flat with serious overcrowding in it.
At Maddocks House, 4th March, exploded the battery of cycle, and the whole house is going burning. Police is coming. Those time I was outside of the house. I'm returned from job.
I learnt about this when I kind of woke up about 8 o'clock on Sunday the 5th of March. I saw our kind of WhatsApp channel was full of messages about the fire. I could see that one person was very seriously injured and in a critical state and in the Royal Hospital, Whitechapel, and there were already reports of like 15 to 18 survivors who'd been living in a 2-bedroom flat who were then had been made homeless.
My mum actually lives on the estate, and I used to live there before I got married, so I'm still in the WhatsApp group. So when the fire actually happened, we talked about it in the WhatsApp group. The community came out immediately to try and help the guys.
ওই রাতে আনুমানিক আমি বাসায় ঢুকছি 12:30টার দিকে। তারপরে আইসা আমি কিছুক্ষণ আমার বেডে, আমি হচ্ছে মানে বাং বেডের উপরেরটাতে থাকতাম, আর ঘটনাটা ঘটছেও আমাদের রুমেই। তো 12:30টার দিকে বাসায় আসছি, বিছানায় শুইতে শুইতে আমার 1টা বাজছে। 2:30টার দিকে হঠাৎ করে শব্দ শুরু হয়েছিল, একটু ইলেকট্রিক স্পার্কলিং শব্দ।
When I came in my home around like 8 or 9 o'clock, and I was so tired and I took my food and I fell asleep.
তো আমি উপর থেকে বাং বেডের উপর থেকে নিচে তাকাই, দেখে নিচে হইতেছে আপনার ফায়ারওয়ার্কের মতো আগুনের ফুলকি বের হচ্ছে আর সাথে ধোঁয়া। তো কিছুক্ষণের মধ্যেই আপনার হইতেছে যে সাদা ধোঁয়া বের হওয়া শুরু হয়েছে। সাদা ধোঁয়া থেকে হঠাৎ করে মানে মোমেন্টের ভেতরে, চোখের পলকের ভেতরে সাদা ধোঁয়া কালো হয়ে গেল, আর পুরো ঘর ছেয়ে গেছে আপনার ধোঁয়া।
And my roommate, he just called me, and I woke up and I figured out some smoky all over everyone's room.
এর মধ্যেই মনে করেন আমি উপর থেকে সবাই চিল্লাচিল্লি করছি। আমাদের হইতেছে গোপাল কাকু ছিল, উনি একটু বয়স্ক, তারপর বিকাশদা ছিল। তো এদেরকে একটু ধরে টানা হেঁচড়া করে আমি ঘর থেকে বের করে নিয়ে আসছি, কারণ বিকাশদা আবার যাইতেছিল ঘরের দিকে আগুন নিভানোর জন্য।
And I visited their room. I couldn't visit because lots of sparkling, like one of the electric bike's battery, someone trying to off the electric, someone trying to off the fire, because it's like sparkling, someone put the water, someone trying with the clothes like this, but it's not getting off. And one by one everyone's just go out, and when we just gone down, I figured out from the down, my room, my full flat is like full of the fire and it's burning, and I started crying.
I was actually on the night of the fire, I somehow managed to miss all of it because I was out quite late and only came back at about 4 in the morning, at which point I checked my phone and had a text from my friend saying there's been a fire in the building, we're not allowed in. And so as I came out of Shadwell station, you could see there was in the station, there were something like maybe 15 or 20 men who were clearly people who had survived the fire, wearing sort of foil blankets.
Yeah, I just returned and finding the law enforcement agency and ambulance, fire brigade that here that and the house is burned.
Inside my home, I left everything, my old documents, my laptop, mobile phones, some cash, what do you say, like whatever I need in my life, daily life, everything I left. Not only me, everyone's actually left in their house. So everyone's one kind of started crying.
ওই বাসে এত মানুষ আসতো যাইতো যে মনে করেন যে আমাদের দ্বারা সবসময় এইটা সম্ভব হইতো না যে 1-2 দিনে সবাই চেনা, কারণ আজকে একটা মানুষ আসতেছে দেখা যাইতেছে যে একদিন পরে সে আর থাকবে না, সে আর থাকে না, চলে যায় অন্য কোনো জায়গায়। মোটামুটি এই হচ্ছে অবস্থা, যেই কারণে আমরা মিজান ভাইরে ঠিকমতো চিন্তামও না। পরে নিচে এসে যখন ফায়ার সার্ভিস এসে বলতেছে কার রুমে কতজন ছিল, কোন রুমে, আমরা দেখলাম আমাদের রুমে মোটামুটি সবাই ঠিক আছে, নোন ফেস যেই কয়টা আছে সবাই বের হইতে পারছে, শুধু পরবর্তীতে এসে দেখা গেল যে মিজান ভাই নামে একজন আসছিল, সে বের হইতে পারে নাই।
We everyone asking like who is he? They are said like his name is Mijan. We don't know who is Mijan because you know the landlord actually change every single times the people. So Mijan bhai maybe came 2 or 3 days ago. That's why we didn't know him much. But Mijan's bhai roommate, he mentioned like someone still inside the room.
আর ওই সময়টা এটা খুব মানে এত বেশি খারাপ লাগে যে আপনি চোখের সামনে দেখতেছেন একটা আগুন জ্বলতেছে আর আপনি ফিল করতেছেন যে ওইটার ভেতরে এখন একটা মানুষ আছে, মানে বলে বোঝানো সম্ভব না আসলে ওই রাতে কি হয়েছিল আমাদের সাথে।
These men had been through an incredibly traumatic event. They'd seen one of their kind of comrades die in a fire right in front of their eyes. Obviously the electrics were almost certainly kind of dodgy and not maintained. Well, there was no fire alarm in the place, there was no smoke alarm in the place. Survivors described seeing this kind of, in a way, this kind of boiling, sort of spitting acid battery on fire, and were, deeply disturbed by the fire, but also their own kind of migration history and kind of family history was often just one of a sequence of traumatic events that had led them to this kind of terrible flat.
We heard there'd been a fire and the stories about what was going on there came out, and that someone had died, and it was quite shocking to hear about something like that in so close to home.
And some neighborhood came and they helped us. Like we had nothing because like I was in my short, I was a little like t-shirt, and I don't have any shoe, some don't have any jacket. So the neighborhood actually gave us some jacket and some clothes, some shoes like this. So they helped us a lot. The police came, the intelligence team came, the fire brigade came first time, and they took one by one they actually list our name, our number, and our profession, our status, and in the following next morning we actually moved to Darul Uloom Islamic Center, maybe it's called. They actually gave us an emergency shelter, and around 12 o'clock in the morning lots of people came and they offered some food, and the council actually put us everyone's like travel lodge in the hotel for temporary emergency.
People then, a few days after, the next day, I think they sent photos round of the inside too. And yeah, it's terrifying, like how much damage was done. And I think we just got lucky that it didn't, and maybe like the way the building was made, that it didn't pass through because everything was ruined. So it's crazy that that impacted only one flat.
When it's come down and they brought the Mijan Bhai, and it was too late. Maybe he was in danger zone, and instantly they took him to the hospital. After 3 or 4 days, like in Al Hilwa zone, he passed away. It was very shocked for us because with so many people we were living, but one of my roommate, he died.
It almost feels wrong to call it a tragedy because it wasn't a tragedy, it was in many ways a political choice. You've got a situation where, 20 students, 20 guys are living in this flat, which is what, 2-bedroom? I mean, there's no way that to call it overcrowding is an understatement. And that's what led to Mizanur's death, because forcing that many people into a confined space like that is never going to end well. But it's because of how things are set up so that decent housing is just inaccessible to so many people.
We don't know actually from where he came from, but he is originally from Bangladesh. So Mijan Bhai died, we very feel sorry for him. So it's only for actually happened for because of I only blame the landlord. Why he's changed so many people instantly for money. He was so greedy.
The fact that Mizanur died has sort of been left behind. I think, in a way, I don't know whether that's just a result of how dehumanizing these bureaucracies are and how dehumanizing the whole apparatus of the hostile environment is, that's what took up the oxygen, and that's what, even we who are trying to help were forced into confronting with on a daily basis, was just all of this, administrative work.
And decades of campaigning for the safe right to live in a home is still something that is not afforded to everyone. And if you are a migrant worker, if you're from an ethnic minority background, those challenges can be even more stark and severe. I think what Mizanur's case so far shows us is that his death perhaps could have been prevented. And no one should live in an overcrowded home. No one should have to face extortionate rents without caps. And all people up and down the country, from any background, need a safe place to live.
The fact that this is an ex-council flat which has been turned into, a quote-unquote hostel, where so many people, precariously employed, precariously settled people, are living at extortionate rates. The fact that this is an ex-council house just so crassly sums up the political priorities of this country over the past 40, 50 years.
Yeah, actually, I found in this house through the advertising in the in a shop. Here is Whitechapel for rent, and I'm just taking this house. As like me, some of the people is taking, and we are paying individually this money.
It's two-bedroom house, including 1 bathroom and 1 kitchen. But I figured out there are living more than 18 people.
No, when I comes in London, I'm never thinking this type of situation happened. But we are facing now this situation, so we are learning something. The next time, when we go shift from one part to other part, we should be consider this situation, maybe facing in future.
ওভারক্রাউডেড বলতেছেন এক্সট্রিম লেভেলের ক্রাউডেড হয়ে যাইতো যখন ধরেন স্টুডেন্ট আসার সিজন হয় যে সেপ্টেম্বরে জানুয়ারিতে ওই সময় একটা সিঙ্গেল রুমে আপনাদের বেড আছে হইতেছে 8টা বাট আমরা থাকছি 10 জন 12 জন পর্যন্ত কেউ ফ্লোরে থাকছে সিঙ্গেল বেড 2টা মোটা মোটা মানুষ শেয়ার করে থাকছে ইভেন কিচেনে পর্যন্ত লোক থাকছে একজন 90 পাউন্ড করে প্রত্যেক সপ্তাহে Yeah, it's expensive.
So the reaction at the kind of night, on the night of the meeting following the fire, when we found out the details about how rent being collected and how many people were paying rent in the flat and how much rent they were paying, we just couldn't believe, our ears and our eyes. It's just, absolutely insane kind of hyper exploitation. Essentially, the landlord was kind of using this as like a giant cash machine. He was ruthlessly, collecting as much rent as possible from as many people as possible. He made individual agreements with every single person in the flat, both for the frequency of rent, the amount of rent, and the rate at which it would be collected. I think the sort of scales fell from our eyes of most of us living on the estate, because we're either leaseholders paying a mortgage and service charges, or we're council tenants or housing association tenants. And so people pay, something like in the region of £500 to £700 per month for a whole flat, not for an individual room, let alone a bunk bed. There's just kind of no reason why anybody should be paying kind of more than that, and if anything, we should all be paying kind of less and get a much better service.
Now, it's one of the things that we did notice about the flat, is that often there would be e-bikes and those sorts of courier transportation locked on the rails outside, and that's why I kind of realised, actually, maybe because I had kind of heard of that setup before, that there may have been just quite a lot of couriers living in the building, and I think ultimately that's what quite a lot of them were.
It was really upsetting because I think many of us in the estate as well are Bengali ourselves, and we have family who are from Bangladesh who have come here and had to kind of deal with this situation, and then to see the kind of conditions they put in, like you wouldn't even put your worst enemies in these kind of conditions. It was very, prisons are not even like that, and I mean I don't believe in prisons anyway, but you have your own space, but there was multiple bunk beds in one room. They weren't even given a bed that they can consistently stay in. You'd come and you'd have to see what's free, and they'd have to just stay there. If all the beds were taken, they'd have to sleep on the floor, even in the kitchen, the passageway.
The way the flat was used meant that there weren't enough keys to go around. So the tenants neither had keys for the downstairs front door, nor for their own kind of front door of the flat. And so the door was just permanently open and people would just come and go. That meant that it was quite cold. They also weren't allowed to use the heating. They weren't allowed to use electricity or gas to cook. And this was because the landlord wanted to keep control of, the bills. And kind of essentially, and this is partly why he was cooking, him and his partner were cooking and bringing food every day to prevent the residents from using the kitchen. But also kind of to control the services and keep the bills to the minimum while maximising his rental income.
Rights are only really useful when they have teeth behind them, when there is someone in power who will say, I'm actually going to enforce this, or there's someone who'll say there should be a consequence for this. The landlord of this flat is still walking around. They sort of live quite nearby, and they probably have, we don't know, they could well have other flats that are similar. The next Maddocks House is probably, as much as I hate to say it, it's probably in the post, unless the council first, or the government in Westminster sort of wants to step in and actually say, we've got space standards for a reason. We've got environmental health sort of departments for a reason. Why aren't we enforcing them?
And we're losing all our personal belongings, computer, laptop, our everything, and we asked the compensation from the landlord.
What did the landlord say?
A landlord is not still now not responding and nothing. He's just saying that he lost his house, a lot of money is gone. And last time when I speak with him over the phone, I asking him, did you go for million or how much for searching? He said, why I go here? It's not my business. I lost my house. So basically his duty is only for money.
Per week, he take from us £90. Altogether, it's like 4 weeks in a month. He took from us £360. So how greedy he was, like you can calculate easily 18 people or sometimes 20 people. Okay, just 18 people into multiple 360 is like more than, it's nearly like 7,000 pounds per month he earning. So sometimes what actually, when our day off or some of my friends day off, we left this place because of I'm gonna see my relatives or cousin or my friends. Oh my god, after 2 days when I came back, I figured out like one of stranger person sleeping in my bed. And I said, who is he? Then the landlord said, oh no, you just gone, that's why I thought 2 days is left, 2 days is already single, so I just put somewhere. I paid already my every week I am paying, but whenever I go for 2 days holiday in my like some relative's house, I figured out someone sleeping, and for 2 days someone sleeping, he also paying the landlord the rent. It's so crazy. How greedy he was, like such a greedy man I have never met in my life.
I think also people are shocked because council tenants, leaseholders are subject to really quite strict kind of policing and surveillance by Tower Hamlets Homes and by the council. We didn't see him, he wasn't subject to any inspections, and he hasn't been subject to any sanction whatsoever as far as we're aware. All we've learned from the council and from THH is that they think that they can definitely prosecute him and fine him for breach of his licence. That there's no talk or discussion of criminal prosecution or, you know, like I guess what most residents would like to see is that the flat is taken out of the landlord's control, because this guy is just clearly menacing and harmful.
My understanding, and I think this is quite common with sort of slumlord cases, is that when they are letting a flat with unlawful overcrowding, they will claim that they were letting within the terms of their HMO licence to a family or to a lawful number of people, and that it was illegally sublet without their knowledge. Now, just in terms of plausibility, that obviously almost beggars belief.
The landlord himself is completely unrepentant. The landlord has gone on Bangladeshi TV and spread rumours in the local community that he was a victim because he was letting 2 bedrooms out to 3 people, and that they then subcontracted and you know, got 20 people in and somehow got 20 bunk beds in. This is, you know, from the little that we know, it's like clearly complete rubbish. This is verified by the caretaker, verified by the neighbours in the block, and verified by every single person living in that flat. There was the landlord visited at least once a day. His wife visited once a day, that he knew fully the situation, that he had rent books collecting rent from each person. We know the different days that he collected rent from every single person. We know what amount they paid, and we even have records of his transfers from their bank accounts to his. Obviously, for tax reasons and for his own criminal reasons, he was largely collecting this money in cash.
After so much investigation, the investigate was closed, and we figured out some things left inside the house. It looks like some luggages, some people's, it's still left. It was like safe. So we need it very badly, but the landlord said no, he never will give us. So we met some people, like it's like one community hall, and one of good person, like his name Anthony. He came as like a superhero, one kind of, like he worked for us a lot. Whenever we shared with him, and Anthony and his team, his volunteer team actually met with us, and they actually listened to our sorrows, and they tried to go our burnt house for rescue our things.
He's threatened threatened other neighbours within the block. He's threatened representatives of a residents' association when they tried to intervene and pick up possessions of survivors of a fire. He tried to blackmail and extort the survivors of the fire and tell them that they couldn't have access because he knew that items survived the fire, so that there were some bags, possessions and important documents in the flat after the fire. The landlord attempted to control access and prevent access to the survivors, the former tenants. With LRU and the TRA, we tried to assert the tenants' rights to access, and we eventually recovered the possessions of the survivors from the flat. But the landlord himself, both threatened many of the survivors on that day. He's also gone to their place of work several times and demanded back rent even after the fire. His position seems to be that the tenants caused the fire and that has lost him an awful lot of money and that he deserves some recompense from the former tenants.
The freeholder of that block is the council. So ultimately the council has a duty and a responsibility to make sure that any of their properties is being used in the way it should be.
As far as we know, there is no criminal charges against the police. Dropped the case. We understand that the council has powers to bring a criminal prosecution, but we've yet to hear a compelling statement from the council about what their investigation consists of, who's responsible for it, and how it will, how it is approaching the kind of matter of justice for the survivors.
And I think the survivors of the fire have given statements to the police. They've been willing to cooperate and help and say, pick out from a lineup, this is the man who collected the money from me every week. And as yet, nothing's happened. Britain is full of some landlords and they get away with it all the time. And it wouldn't surprise me if nothing happened, honestly.
We kind of live at a point where, all of these things are bubbling to the surface in a kind of crescendo of kind of crisis, in a way, disasters, I suppose what you could call sort of like socially shaped disasters. So like Grenfell was clearly a kind of accident waiting to happen. There was like a long history of documentation of the residents complaining about poor repairs, complaining about poor building work, complaining about the kinds of inspections of the work that was taking place, and that resulted in an enormous fire which killed 72 people. We experienced this as a kind of similarly state-made disaster.
Our neighbor floods, they complained the council for too many people who are living here and they're making sounds, noisy. Some people using electric bikes, so 2 or 3 bikes in the corridor. So the council also knew about us, but they didn't take any action.
When you sort of look at what actually local authority have done before and since the fire, there are all sorts of questions about licensing, there are all sorts of questions about the enforcement of space standards, there are all sorts of questions around, it doesn't change anything. That flat, I believe, did have an HMO licence.
Residents had raised those concerns with THH and they'd also raised them with the council, and there's like a kind of serious, a serious paper trail documenting all these complaints. We know from the caretaker that issues of fire safety were raised for at least 6 months before the fire. We know that in November, I think in August, the complaints were sort of recognised by the council and THH, and then THH or the council issued the landlord with a licence for an HMO, which entitled him to rent 2 rooms in a 2-bedroom flat to 2 separate households with a total of 3 people there. So he'd obviously just transgressed this licence to a huge degree. Why, when they were told that this guy was ruthlessly exploiting people in this flat, was he then issued with a licence? 2 months after that, in November 2022, the London Fire Brigade visited the flat because there was serious leaks down into the flats below, causing the electricity to be turned off.
Why was Tower Hamlets Homes, the management organisation, not saying this is unacceptable and enforcing, whether it's through a court order or some financial penalty to the landlord, that this is unacceptable?
The council kind of expressed a lot of concern and made immediately the connection with Grenfell, but did they do anything? Kind of no. You know, they've done nothing to change the licensing of the HMO, where there's clearly so many holes that that a flat like this could fall through the licensing scheme that they run. In terms of fire safety follow-up, we just had a private contractor come down and walk with the clipboard in front of the building for 5 minutes, you know. Nothing in terms of visiting each flat, you know, renewing, telling people to fit smoke alarms, fit fire alarms, just even those basics, which would maybe help a bit should something like this happen again. That hasn't happened. So in terms of the talk about kind of taking it seriously is like kind of just rhetoric, quite empty rhetoric.
But learning that, and learning just to the extent of the fact that this was avoidable, and that frankly the council knew and they did absolutely nothing, that was the thing that made me angry. And just looking at how local government and local government enforcement of housing laws just doesn't work. And it's entirely possible it's not necessarily a corruption thing, it's just about how there really is. And you know, councils have been underfunded for the last 15 years, and I think housing enforcement is one of the things that's been cut. But there is just no enforcement for this stuff.
স্পেশালি সমস্যা হচ্ছে ম্যাক্সিমাম আমাদের স্টুডেন্টদের, বিকজ যারা অন্য পাসপোর্টধারী আছে তাদের জন্য কাউন্সিল কিছুটা হলেও অবলাইজ কিছু করার জন্য, কিন্তু আমাদের স্টুডেন্টদের জন্য তারা মানে স্পষ্টভাবে বলে দিচ্ছে যে না, এটাই T20 লাস্ট, এরপরে আর আমরা আপনাদের দেখতে পারবো না।
There's no reason why, you know, the day after the fire, the week after the fire, someone in power in the local authority elsewhere couldn't have just said, you know, here's the money for, you know, reasonably long-term accommodation, here's where you go for legal advice, here's how we do a public inquiry, all of this stuff. And every time that we would try and approach an organisation like that, what we would find was that, you know, it was almost there in name only. Like, just the extent to which this country and its systems of support have been gutted is devastating, really. And I think that is something which needs to be urgently confronted by anyone who's serious about making Britain a habitable place to live again.
Whenever I go for another house for me searching, I found some home, but the landlord won't give us the room because I don't have any reference.
So the key stumbling blocks for, you know, and obstacles to obtaining secure contracts for the men who are living in the flat are that they don't have the background and references required of, you know, tenancies in the UK to obtain a contract. They can't afford the exorbitant deposits that are being demanded by letting agencies. They experience kind of racism because they're brown, because they're new to the UK, because their language skills aren't always perfect. Yeah, and generally the kind of work that they do is in sort of 0 hours contracts. They're not the kind of contracts that lettings agents, you know, approve for giving out tenancies.
The landlord knew exactly what he was doing, targeting Bengali men who are recent migrants, because people like that know that you can't, that these men just don't have any other option. So they fall into this black market where you basically pay way through the nose for way less than anyone else. So you end up, yeah, you do look at a market where there are aspects of kind of probably racial and class privilege that give you advantages in the market that go beyond any differential and actual financial means.
The sell-off of social housing, not building housing that is affordable, because Tower Hamlets, everywhere you look, there are properties being built left, right and centre, but they are not for ordinary people. They are not for people who are on low incomes. The rental market is the way it is because it leans towards certain people, which are the landlords and the property developers. And I think that needs to change.
আমরা এরকম না, আমরা কিন্তু টাকা দিচ্ছি, আমরা এই টাকা দিয়ে চাইলে কিন্তু অন্য জায়গায় বাসা নিতে পারতাম। এরকম না যে আমরা কেউ নিতে চাইতেছি না, এরা যে আমরা বাসা পাই নাই। আমরা অনেক দিন ধরে সবাই খুঁজতেছে একটা বেটার কোনো জায়গা যাবে। মানে কারোতে এত টাকা দিয়ে ভাই ওই রকম অবস্থায় থাকার ইচ্ছা থাকে না। এগুলা সিস্টেম যদি এরকম হয় তাহলে তো বাসা পাওয়াটা সম্ভব না। সেই কারণেই তো মনে হয় যে এইরকম মানে এত ওভারক্রাউডেড প্লেস এক্সিস্ট করে। যদি সবাই বাসা পাইতো তাহলে তো কেউ এখানে থাকতো না।
You know, one of the things which really benefits the owners of property in this country is this scarcity of property and this scarcity, in fact, you know, the word property is such an ugly word, this scarcity of housing, of accommodation, of shelter, of a place to live. And, you know, that forces people into the most dire and desperate avenues to try and just find a place to sleep at night.
So we began to kind of like keep in frequent contact with survivors of the fire. We held a vigil for Mizunur Rahman some days, some kind of weeks after the immediate fire. I think basically by the end of that week, the week beginning March the 6th, it was clear that Mizunur Rahman was going to pass away. And he was in hospital, he couldn't be, he was in a coma, and his burns and kind of smoke damage to his lungs was too serious. So that obviously kind of like made the campaign just that much more tenacious, and the anger that was felt in the local community was really strong.
More as members of a network who had come together sort of organically, you know, lots of existing groups, lots of people fighting for housing in the borough already, people fighting for migrants' rights in the borough already, people fighting against the hostile environment in the borough, who saw what happened in the fire as just this dreadful concatenation of all of those struggles.
We worked with the office of Afsana Begum, a local MP, and she provided some casework support, and I think she's also intervened and contacted the Home Office on behalf of some of the survivors. There are at least 2 asylum seekers within the group. There is many that have recourse, at least sort of 5 or 6 that have recourse to public funds, and then many because of their student status where they're allowed only to work 20 hours a week. And then they don't have any access to benefit.
And so it was really interesting that, you know, we got a flyer through the door from the TRA going to a meeting and actually meeting people from realising that actually there is a local community that does care about the estates.
I don't even want to think about what would have happened to them, because in some of the initial nights they were staying in the mosque overnight, and residents had collected like clothes and things for them and fed them. And it's only after pressure from the residents that they were put into hotels. But even that was meant to be like for a few days, and it's from pressure from the residents that kept getting extended, and it's now the residents actually helped them find housing, like the church, for example. That wasn't from the council, that was the residents coming together, and a contact from Anthony.
Moving them into accommodation provided by the local church at no cost. Where they just, and we arranged a deal where they just pay utilities for the next 3 months. And so this kind of promise of secure, stable, safe housing for 3 months was kind of very much welcomed by the group.
Organisations like, I think, the London Renters Union are quite interesting in that they do step in and they do care. And to have seen the number of organisations locally that have stepped in to support the survivors of the fire has been really quite impressive.
And so what we tried to develop within the campaign is always a kind of link between this kind of hyper-exploitation, kind of chain of global migration experienced by the guys in the flat, and actually kind of local conditions on the ground, housing disrepair, negligence by the councils, rapacious behaviour by landlords, letting agents, anyway across the whole sector in the borough.
I was mentally totally shocked, and I couldn't eat properly, I couldn't walk properly, I was so depressed. It like we lost our own, one kind of. My life totally changed, one kind of, I can say. What I was before, but my life is not like going smoothly, going nicely.
Manufactured accidents are becoming more frequent in London. And there's been, as well as Grenfell, a host of other smaller fires, both in clad blocks and not clad blocks. It's obvious that overcrowding and the more that housing gets squeezed leads to unsafe conditions, to more likely of death and injury from accidents. Housing run as a commodity is a death trap for everybody. It doesn't produce stable situations for people to live in. It's detrimental to their kind of work and livelihood. It produces all sorts of dangerous side effects, inflationary tendencies, and it's the opposite of the way that we want to live. We think that the history of the 20th century got us over, this basic kind of thought that housing shouldn't be treated as a commodity, but yet we find ourselves in the 21st century with London as an epicenter of global financial industries, and the pressure on people's living situation. It's just cuts everybody to the bone and puts them in danger.
Whatever happened with us, still we are facing. We are actually going through many bad times, and still we are searching for us a house, because this is emergency shelter provided by NTNE, but it's only for 3 months. It also going to be finished very soon. So still we are searching for us a better life, and we are still suffering, and I am still in trauma. Actually, seriously, I am still in trauma. I am still visiting the GP, the psychiatrist actually, and I just want to say everyone, don't go for anywhere what actually give you bad times in your future. Make sure you are going a safe place, well maintenance actually, not like us.
In terms of what I'd like to see done about the fire, I'd frankly like to see the landlords arrested and put in prison, and I don't think those sorts of prosecutions happen very often. I'd like to see Tower Hamlets Homes clean up its act. I'd like to see them, just take care of the buildings and the people under their care in a way that they just do not at the moment. I'd like to see some justice for the survivors of the fire.
I really hope that this is a waking call, at least for this estate, to kind of organise around our housing situation. And I'm hoping that, so like I said, with the organising weekly to kind of connect the different estates and the community in general in terms of the, just to talk about the housing crisis.
Grenfell is 6 years ago now, and we just can't let it keep happening on this cycle that every few years we have this, crime of housing in the country where people die and where big questions get asked in the aftermath. And we see a few piecemeal steps towards trying to change things around the edges, but nothing ultimately happens, and really nothing will happen until we dismantle the rigged housing system in this country, until we give people actual, proper, workable avenues that aren't just being at the mercy of the most predatory private landlords.
আমরা জাস্ট চাইতেছি একটা থাকার জায়গা, যে আমরা একটা জায়গায় আমরা পার্মানেন্টলি স্টে করতে পারবো, প্লাস আমাদের কি সব কিছু আমরা দেশ থেকে, কারণ সবাই যারা এখানে আসে না, সবাই মোটামুটি নতুন নতুন আসে, তাদের সবার কাছে দেশ থেকে অনেক তারা স্মৃতি নিয়ে আসে, অনেক জিনিসপত্র নিয়ে আসে, আর সবগুলোই আমাদের বার্ন হয়ে গেছে, সব পুড়ে ছাই। লাস্ট টাইম যখন পুলিশের সাথে কথা হয়েছিল তখন বলছিল যে এভরিথিং ইজ অ্যাশ, আমাদের তো আবার টুকটাক করে সব কিছু জিনিসপত্র কিছু কিনতে হবে, তো জাস্ট বেসিক একটা মানুষের বেসিক যেটুক লাগে আমরা সেইটুকুই চাইতেছি, এর সাথে বেশি কিছু না, একটা থাকার জায়গা।
Decent housing is an absolutely fundamental right, and I would like to see politicians locally and nationally try and, start backing up any similar sentiments with some real action.